So if you want to save $10,000 as fast as possible, stop watching 4 hours of Instagram reels every day. That's all. Thank you. In all seriousness, if you want to save up $10,000, that's good. That probably means you want to change something about your situation and that you already have a clearly defined goal. And that alone already puts you ahead of most people, so congratulations on taking the first step. Contrary to what a lot of people with not so great spending habits might tell you, it's actually relatively easy to save up a lot of money, so long as you're willing to put in a bit more effort than your average guy off the street. But if you do just a handful of the things I'm going to mention, it's probably not going to take you more than just a couple months, in most cases. So in 2023, the average salary for Americans varied from about $45,000 in Mississippi, which was the lowest paying state across the board, all the way up to about $76,600 in the highest average paying state, which was Massachusetts. And obviously this is a relatively large discrepancy between the lowest and the highest earning state, but cost of living does tend to equal out between states. And that's not always going to be a perfectly 100% rule, but for the purpose of this video, let's just assume that a higher average paying state also probably costs more to live in. So why do we care? So it turns out the average household in America, which is typically 2 working adults, earned an average of $94,000 before tax, but spent nearly $73,000 per year. So here's where that gets bad. The average take-home pay for somebody making $94,000 per year is roughly $70,000, or $56.50 per month. So that means that the average American household, even with a $94,000 income spread across all 50 states, is spending roughly $3,000 to $5,000 more per year than what they're actually making. Now I know this sounds obvious, but if you're spending $3,000 to $5,000 more than what you make per year, it's very unlikely that you're ever going to save $10,000, and you're not going to get to do the things that you want with money, like buy a house or buy a car. So the point of this video is to focus on how you can save $10,000 as quickly as possible so that you can have a large chunk of money set aside for the future. And while saving $10,000 might seem like a relatively difficult task for somebody just starting out, the reality is, logistically speaking, it's pretty simple. There's really only 2 ways to save a lot of money quickly, legally speaking. Right, so we can either reduce our income or we can increase our spending. And increasing our income is probably the more desirable option of the 2, but the reality is increasing our income is going to take probably more time and effort than just reducing how much we're spending each month. So step 1 is pretty simple, and it doesn't actually require any action on our part. So first, you have to accept the fact that spending money on things that don't benefit you is really just going to hold you back in the long run. And I understand the argument for, wanting to spend some money on fun activities and trying to have a good work-life balance and just doing things that you like to do. But the reality is, if you could just spend 6 months or so not spending any extra money aside from the things that you absolutely need, you might be pretty shocked at how much money you could save just by living like a hermit for a couple months. So here's what I would do if I wanted to reduce my spending as much as possible. So first, you have to track your money for at least a month or so just to see how much you're spending on each category. And most people don't actually keep a detailed budget every month, and I promise if this is you, you'll learn a ton about yourself in just the first month. So I made a video on how I make a budget every month. It was also my very first YouTube video, so the production quality is kind of trash, but the template that I use to actually keep track of my money every month is a pretty good template, and I still think you can get value out of the video even though it's kind of trash. So I'll link that in the description just in case you want to see what template that I use and that kind of thing. Anyway, once you make your budget and you get a feel for how much you're spending in each category, the next step is just to look at all the data and see where you can improve most at. So most people's number 1 expense each month is housing. So if you're able to reduce your housing expense, that's probably going to be the quickest way to save a few hundred, if not a few $1,000s a month. So let's say you're able to move across the street to a smaller apartment. You could probably save a few $100 a month just by starting there. The next big expense that most of us are guilty of that we really shouldn't be doing is going out to eat frequently. So in 2021, Americans spent about an average of $300 per month going out to eat every month, which averages out to about $3,600 a year, and I'm sure those numbers have only gone up since 2021. So maybe you only go out to eat once every month or once every other month for the next couple months. You might be able to cut out another $200 or $300, maybe even $400 every month just by staying in and cooking a cheaper meal. Next category we have is transportation. Apparently the average new car payment for Americans in 2023 was about $730 a month, and the average used car payment was about $530 a month, which these seem insane to me. And as we know, unfortunately, the used and new car markets are both pretty crazy right now, so it might not be a good idea just to sell your old car and hope to get a beater. But if you have a relatively expensive car, you might be able to trade it for something more basic like a Corolla or something, and you might be able to save another few $100s a month just by doing that. Not to mention your insurance costs will probably go down. You might also get a couple $1,000s just from trading the car in. The last step in reducing costs each month is to take a closer look at your own personal budget and see what else you might be willing to put on hold for a while. Maybe you have a few monthly memberships that you don't use anymore, or streaming services, or some other things that just don't bring you value anymore. If you're able to reduce those, you can probably shave off another couple $100 each month. And just to sidetrack for a minute, another cool learning experience from doing this for a couple months is you might realize that some of those things that you were paying for each month or every other month or whatever aren't actually helping you or bringing value to your life. So for example, personally, I had my Xbox account and my Netflix account, and I didn't really use either hardly at all because one, I'm busy and I really don't have much time to do that. But even when I do have time, it just wasn't bringing me a lot of extra value. So I canceled both my Netflix account and my Xbox. And honestly, since then, I haven't missed it for a second. And even though it's only like $15 or something per month for each of those two things, I probably wouldn't repurchase those things even if I started to make a lot more money. So that's just a little side note that I thought was worth mentioning. So to recap so far, track your money each month, figure out where you're spending money on things that don't bring you value, and make adjustments based on what you learn from actually tracking your expenditures every month. So that's generally how to decrease your expenses each month, but we can also take a quick look at increasing your income. So first, if you have a really mediocre job that isn't really paying you much, maybe consider 2 or 3 positive personality traits or skill sets that you have that you're really good at, and just write those down. So now just do a couple hours of research and see if you can figure out what type of jobs exist that those particular skill sets might be applicable to. So maybe you're really extroverted or good at forming relationships. Maybe you could do something like a sales job or get into real estate. And maybe you have really good technical or creative skills and you could help somebody edit a video or create a project. It doesn't really matter what you're good at because there's literally an endless amount of potential jobs that you could be good at. And you're definitely not the one person that's not going to be able to find a job ever. So just spend a little bit of time looking around and you might be able to open up a new door. So next, let's say you have a pretty good job, but you haven't really been able to increase your income in the last couple of years. A lot of people, especially toward the midpoint of their career, find themselves in this position, and the good news is it's relatively easy to break out of that. And there's really 2 ways you can do this. So one, you could market yourself and your current skill set and switch to a different company that might be paying more for that same type of job. So generally speaking, if your goal is to make the most amount of money that you can with a particular skill set, you want to change jobs or make a lateral move about every 2 years. The other way that you can increase your income is to move up to a management position. In most cases, it's probably only going to take about 2 years at 40 hours per week to get really good at a particular field, so long as you're putting in consistent effort every week. So if you aren't getting the type of pay raises that you think you're actually worth, that might actually be a good sign that it's time to move into a management role. So every good team, whether it's in business or tech or whatever, needs a good leadership team just to keep everybody on track. So if you develop your leadership skills and your personal interaction skills, you might find that you're actually pretty well suited to lead a team given that you already have a well-defined skill set down. Right, you'll have the experience and the technical skills to problem solve, and you'll be able to help keep your team on the right path. So if your goal is to increase your income as much as possible in a short period of time, either maybe consider making a lateral move to a different company or moving into a management role where you can get paid more to manage projects and teams. All right, so let's say you were actually able to start doing a lot of these things. Let's say you stopped eating out as much, you made a personal budget and figured out where your weaknesses were, and managed to make a few dollars more per month, either by making a lateral move or going into management or just picking up a side hustle. So how long should it actually take to save up 10 grand? So let's take a look at 2 different situations and see if you might fall into one of these 2.
Obviously, this is a pretty simple diagram here, but we've got somebody that makes about $100,000 a year, spending about $2,000 per month on rent, about $500 on a car, $2,500 on other expenses, and with that $100,000 salary, they're going to take home somewhere in the ballpark of $600 to $6,500 per month. So person A here is spending $5,000, so that leaves about a $1,500 difference. So at this current savings rate, this would be somewhere in the ballpark of about 7 months to save up $10,000. Let's just say that they're able to reduce their rent by maybe $500 and other expenses, which probably include going out to eat, by another $500. You could pull that into saving $2,500 a month. And at that rate, you're only looking at about 4 months to save 10 grand. So then obviously reducing your expenses on top of having a pretty good income, you can save up pretty quick. Now on the other end of the spectrum here, this would be person B. So person B makes about $40,000 a year, spends $800 on rent, about $250 on car, which I forgot to write, and spends about $1,200 on other expenses. So with $40,000 a year, their take home should be somewhere around $2,700 a month, and they're spending $2,250 per month. So that's a difference of $450 each month. So at that rate, obviously that's going to take quite a while. That's something like 24 months. If they're able to save all the way up to $1,050, which would just be by making a $600 difference. So let's say they're able to reduce their other expenses by $300, and maybe they pick up another shift or 2 somewhere somewhere else, so they get another $300. Well, that's a $600 difference, so that $450 plus $600 difference comes out to about $1,050 per month. So if you're able to come up with an extra $600 a month, it could take person B with a $40,000 a year salary only about 10 months to save 10 grand. So in the grand scheme of things, that's really not that long.
So the big takeaway here that I want to make is it's possible to save a good bit of money even if you have a relatively low income. But having a higher paying job obviously speeds up the process. So obviously this scenario is a really dumbed down version of actual living, but the same concept applies even if our spending habits are a bit more complex in real life. So while you probably won't fit perfectly into either of these two scenarios, hopefully you get the train of thought behind this. So just to recap, if you want to save $10,000, make a budget and keep track of every single dollar for a month or two. Temporarily cut out all expenses that don't either bring value to your life or value to other people. And while you work on reducing your expenses, you can also try to fill your time by either trying to get a pay raise, making more money on the side by like doing a side hustle or something, or just picking up extra shifts at your current job. And finally, make a personal plan and stick to it. So it's probably not going to be glamorous, but if you make a good plan, chances are you'll have your first $10,000 saved up in less than a year. And I know with rising prices of literally everything, trying to save money can be a bit demoralizing these days. But even a few $100s a month really do make a difference in the long run. And the good news is you have a lot of control in your spending. And I totally get that prices are completely insane on so many different products right now. But so many people just end up complaining about the prices and still end up buying those things that they don't need. So for at least the next few months, try to avoid overspending on unnecessary items, and you might be surprised how much you save in just a pretty short amount of time. Anyway, I appreciate you hanging out with me for a few minutes. I hope I was able to add some value to your day. Don't let the news and social media fool you. The world's not coming to an end, and we're going to be just fine. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next week. Have a good day.